The world stood still, hearts heavy with the weight of a legend's passing. George Foreman, the man who defied the odds, shattered expectations, and rewrote the very fabric of heavyweight boxing, was gone. The news sent ripples across the sport, leaving fans, fighters, and historians alike grasping for words to articulate what he truly meant to the world. This wasn't just the loss of a fighter. This was the departure of a titan, a man whose legacy was forged through fire, redemption, and the unwavering belief that one could rise again no matter how many times they fell. For those who followed boxing, the name George Foreman was synonymous with destruction in the ring. His punches didn't just land, they detonated. From the streets of Marshall, Texas, to the pinnacle of the boxing world, he was a force of nature, a juggernaut that seemed unstoppable in his prime. He wasn't just a champion, he was a phenomenon. A man whose fists sent shudders through the most feared fighters of his era. Ken Norton, Joe Frazier, Michael Moore, and, of course, the iconic battle in Zaire, the rumble in the jungle where he squared off against Muhammad Ali in a fight that would forever be etched in history. And yet, George Foreman was so much more than just a boxer. He was a preacher, a mentor, a businessman, a man who walked away from the sport at the height of his power, only to return 10 years later, proving that age was just a number when destiny called. His comeback wasn't just improbable, it was impossible. And yet, in 1994, at the age of 45, he silenced the doubters and cemented his place as the oldest heavyweight champion in history. A title no one could take from him, a feat no one could replicate. But on March 21, 2025, the fight ended not in a ring, not under the bright lights of a packed arena, but peacefully, surrounded by those who loved him most. The news spread like wildfire, each headline hitting harder than the last. George Foreman passes away at 76. The words felt surreal, as if the man who had overcome so much, who had risen time and time again, was somehow beyond mortality. His family's statement was simple yet profound. "Our hearts are broken. With profound sorrow, we announce the passing of our beloved George Edward Foreman, Sr., who peacefully departed on March 21, 2025, surrounded by loved ones." The words carried the weight of a life lived fully, a life defined by more than just championship belts and knockouts. He was a husband, a father, a grandfather and great-grandfather, a man of faith and purpose, who spent his latter years not in pursuit of fame or fortune, but in service to something greater. The tributes poured in, voices from every corner of the boxing world and beyond, speaking to the magnitude of the loss. Mike Tyson, a man who once embodied the raw ferocity of the sport, took to social media to express his sorrow. Condolences to George Foreman's family. His contribution to boxing and beyond will never be forgotten. Coming from Iron Mike, a man who understood the struggles and triumphs of the fight game like few others, those words carried weight. Teddy Atlas, a trainer and analyst known for his poetic way with words, put it simply, he was a special fighter and a special person, put here for a special reason. To teach us anything was possible, if you believed it was. Bob Arum, the legendary promoter, called him a true member of the top-rank family. And Mauricio Suleiman, president of the WBC, painted a picture of Foreman's character that extended beyond boxing. The great George Foreman has passed away. Legendary boxing champion, life-changing preacher, husband, father, grand and great-grandfather, and the best friend you could have. His memory is now eternal. Even those outside the immediate boxing world paid their respects. Turki Alal Sheikh, the man behind Riyadh season's growing boxing spectacle, called it a day of loss for the entire sport, saying, "The last boxing pillar for an unforgettable era has passed away today. May his soul rest in peace. Big George Foreman." Chris Eubank Jr., whose own career has been marked by battles in the ring, acknowledged the loss with a heartfelt rest in peace to one of my boxing heroes, the legendary George Foreman. The outpouring of love wasn't just about nostalgia or history. It was a testament to the impact Foreman had on generations. Young fighters, old legends, promoters, trainers, everyone, regardless of their role in the sport, recognized that boxing had lost one of its last true giants. But how do you truly measure a life like Foreman's? Is it in the wins? The knockouts? The titles? Or is it in the way he inspired? The way he showed the world that no fall was permanent, no defeat absolute? His journey wasn't a straight path to greatness. It was marked by adversity, by setbacks, by moments where the world counted him out. And yet, he always came back. And now, the question lingers, what does the world of boxing look like without George Foreman? The man whose name became bigger than the sport itself. The man who, with a single right hand, reminded the world that second chances weren't just possible, they were inevitable. The gloves are hung up. The final bell has sounded. But legends don't fade. They don't disappear. They live on in the echoes of the past, in the stories told by those who were fortunate enough to witness greatness firsthand. But this isn't the end of the story. No, this is just the beginning of remembering a legacy too great to be confined to a single lifetime. The silence left in George Foreman's absence was deafening. Across the world, fans, fighters, and legends of the sport sat in quiet reflection, trying to grasp the weight of losing a man who had seemed larger than life itself. He was more than just a fighter, more than just a champion. He was a symbol of resilience, of redemption, of unwavering belief that no setback was ever truly final. And now, as the tributes continued to pour in, the world was left to reckon with what his absence truly meant. To understand the loss, one had to first understand the man. It was easy to speak of Foreman's career in statistics: 76 wins, 68 knockouts, two-time heavyweight champion of the world, Olympic gold medalist, but numbers could never capture the essence of his story. The boy from Marshall, Texas, who had known hunger and hardship before he ever knew glory. The young man who found salvation in a pair of boxing gloves, his raw power undeniable, but his path uncertain. The wrecking machine that tore through the heavyweight division, obliterating everyone in his path until he stood alone at the top of the mountain. And then the fall. The shocking, almost surreal night in Zaire, when Muhammad Ali did the unthinkable, making the monster puncher swing at ghosts until exhaustion swallowed him whole. That moment could have defined him. It could have been the end of his story. Many fighters never recover from a loss like that. But Foreman was never just a fighter. He was a man of reinvention, a man of purpose. When he left boxing, he didn't just step away. He disappeared from the world he had once ruled, finding solace in faith, in preaching, in a life that had nothing to do with the violence of the ring. He spoke of God, of love, of humility, and it seemed for a time that George Foreman, the fighter, was gone forever. And then the impossible happened. 10 years after his last fight, long past the age when most men would dare to dream of a comeback, Foreman laced up his gloves once more. The boxing world laughed. A 38-year-old man returning to the ring after a decade away? Absurd. Impossible. But Foreman never listened to doubters. And slowly, fight by fight, he proved them all wrong. What followed was one of the greatest sports stories ever written. He wasn't the young destroyer anymore. He was older, slower, but wiser. He didn't win fights by overwhelming his opponents with speed or athleticism. He won with experience, patience, and a right hand that still carried the weight of a freight train. And on that fateful night in 1994, when he knocked out Michael Moorer to reclaim the heavyweight championship at 45 years old, the world bore witness to something truly extraordinary. It wasn't just a victory. It was a message that age was nothing but a number, that dreams had no expiration date, that belief and perseverance could rewrite history itself. And that is why, in the wake of his passing, the boxing world mourned not just the man, but everything he represented. He was a fighter who had done what no one else could. A preacher who had found peace after war. A businessman who had built an empire beyond the ring. A father and grandfather who, despite all his success, never lost sight of what truly mattered. For days, social media flooded with tributes. Stories were shared, memories unearthed, each one painting a picture of the man behind the gloves. Mike Tyson, a fighter whose own story was filled with peaks and valleys, spoke of Foreman's enduring impact. His contribution to boxing and beyond will never be forgotten. Teddy Atlas, always eloquent in his words, called him a special person put here for a special reason. To teach us anything was possible, if you believed it was. Promoter Bob Arum, who had worked with countless greats over the decades, still saw Foreman as something unique. A true member of the top-rank family, he called him. A simple yet profound statement that underscored Foreman's deep connection to the sport. Even those outside the ring, like Turki Al-Sheikh, recognized what the world had lost. The last boxing pillar for an unforgettable era has passed away today. And he was right. With Foreman's passing, an era of heavyweight boxing that had captivated the world, the era of Ali, Frazier, Foreman, Norton had officially drawn to a close. Chris Eubank Jr., a fighter from a different generation, called him a hero. And he wasn't alone. Across the globe, fans spoke of Foreman as something more than just a champion. He was an inspiration, a symbol of second chances. Proof that no matter how many times life knocked you down, there was always a way to rise again. But the tributes were not just about his victories in the ring. They were about his kindness, his wisdom, his sense of humor. Who could forget the George Foreman grill, the invention that made him just as famous in kitchens as he was in arenas? Or the way he always carried himself with humility and grace, never forgetting where he came from. Now, the question loomed: how do you honor a legacy like George Foreman's? How do you properly say goodbye to a man who seemed too big, too powerful, too legendary to ever truly be gone? The answer, perhaps, lay not in mourning his death, but in celebrating his life. Because George Foreman was not a man to be remembered in sorrow. He was a man who defied expectations at every turn, who met every challenge with a smile, who embraced life with both fists clenched, ready for the next round. He was a man who refused to be defined by his failures, instead choosing to write his own destiny, time and time again. And now, as the boxing world moves forward, his spirit lingers. In the echoes of every right hand thrown with purpose. In the sweat and blood of every fighter who steps into the ring believing that they too can defy the odds. George Foreman is gone. But legends never truly die. And so, as the world says goodbye, one thing remains certain: his story will be told for generations to come. Because the tale of George Foreman is not just a boxing story. It's a human story. A story of faith, of redemption, of resilience. A story that reminds us all, no matter the count, no matter the odds, there is always a way to rise. And that, perhaps, is the greatest lesson of them all.